Can other languages be traced back to Hebrew?
We are familiar with the Parashat Migdal Babel, the episode of the Tower of Babel, described in the Torah, in Sefer Bereshith, in the book of Genesis, Perek Yud Aleph, chapter 11. We read at the beginning of the chapter, Vayihi chol ha'aretz safa ahath udvarim ahodim. And all the land, literally, all people were speaking one language, udvarim ahodim, that is to say, similar, recognizable, agreed upon usages, expressions, and concepts. And this is describing the area of Mesopotamia, as it says, وَيِهِي بِنُسْعَمْ مِقَدَمْ, as they traveled eastward, وَيِمْثَؤُ فِكْعَى بَأَرَسْ شِنْعَارْ وَيَشَّفُوا شَمْ. And the people settled in the area known, in the low-lying area, the valley of Shinar, which is Babel, which is Mesopotamia, the area between the two great rivers, the Euphrates and the Tigris. And then, as we all know, the idea was proposed to build a great city, a great tower. وَيُمَرُوا إِشْ الرَّعِهُ, one said to the other, إِهَوَا نِلْبَنَا لِفَنِيم وَنِسْرَفَا لِسْرَفَا وَتَهِي لَهَمْ هَلِّفَنَا لَأَوَنْ وَأَحِمَارْ هَيَا لَهَمْ لَحُمِرْ. They prepared the building materials of bricks and mortar. وَيُمَرُوا Hava nivna lanu ir, umigdal urosho v'shamayim. Let us build a city with a great citadel, a tower, very tall, very high, literally reaching to the heavens. V'na'aseh lanu shem, pen nafus al panei chol haaretz. What their intention was precisely is something that needs to be discussed in a separate shiur, a separate discussion. Here we are focusing on the linguistic aspect of this episode. This plan was opposed by Hashem, as we read in Pasuk Zayin, verse 7. Hava nerada, let us go down, v'novala sham sefatham, and let us confuse their, and scramble, perhaps is a better translation, their language. Ashar lo yishma'u ish sefath ra'ehu, so that they will not understand each other. And this, in fact, resulted in the collapse of this scheme. The Torah goes on to say in Pasuk Taith, verse 9, Al ken qara shema Bavel, therefore this area was called Bavel, Kisham balal Adonai sefat kol haaretz, because there Hashem confused and scrambled the language of all people, umisham hafisam Adonai, and Hashem caused them to be scattered al panei kol haaretz, across the earth. So the Torah describes the place, the area, as Bavel, because the Hebrew root verb balal, livlol, is to mix up, to mix various things together, to scramble various things together. And this is a very important clue to understanding what transpired here. Therefore, what we are discussing is not the creation of new languages ex nihilo, from nothing. We are discussing the introduction of various forms of speech and language which derived from a common source, but which were somehow caused to become confused and scrambled in such a way that people would not understand each other. So the answer to that question, can many words in many languages be traced back to a primal Holy Tongue or Hebrew language, root language? The answer is yes. And in fact, the English word yes is very instructive in this regard. If we look in the Concise Oxford Dictionary, for example, yes, the origin of the word is given as Old English, yese, written G-E-S-E, but pronounced yese, as was pointed out to me by certain people, and I thank them for that. But it's not quite as simple as that. because I wish to read to you something that I discovered in the Oxford University Press blog on this word yes. And I quote, "The word yese, with G pronounced as Y, has existed since the days of Old English. Later etymologists did not doubt that yese is a combination of ye and se, that is to say the ge or the ye, and a separate word se, with ye being preserved in the modern word ye, yea, and cognate with Dutch and German ja, Old Norse ja, Gothic, etc., various ancient Germanic dialects where the word for yes is always something along the lines of ja or ye. However, it says here in this blog, the S part of the word yes remains in limbo. In other words, it is unclear to the etymologists where the second consonantal sound of this word yes comes from, because if it is cognate with those words ye, yea, ya, etc., then we rightly can ask ourselves, where does the S come from? And therefore, the following suggestions are offered. It may be the stump, it says here, of soit, which is like so, or of si or z, the present subjunctive of the Old English verb to be. In other words, that it's a general affirmation. When one says yes, one is affirming or stating that something is. But I believe that we can offer a better suggestion and explanation of that second consonantal sound in the word yes, the S. Because it seems to me quite plain that the word yes in English is clearly and plainly derived from the Hebrew word yesh, and I will explain. In Hebrew, one needs to state at the outset, the letters of the alphabet are all consonantal. The vowels are not represented as letters of the alphabet. The vowels, if and when represented in full, when the text is what we call vocalized, the vowels are represented by dots and dashes above or beneath the letters. And because this is the nature of Hebrew, a text can frequently be read without dots and dashes, without the vocalization. And that is how modern Hebrew is generally written, sometimes to its detriment, but that's another discussion. In essence, if a person knows the context and understands the language fairly well, one gets by without the vocalization, without the vowels being printed on the page. So therefore, for example, when reading from a Sefer Torah, from a Torah scroll, one looks at the text written on the parchment and one sees absolutely no vowels at all. The text before one is entirely the consonantal alphabetic text of the Hebrew without the vowels, and one has to know how to read, how to pronounce any given word. And in Hebrew, for example, this can be very significant. For example, the word ya'aseh in Hebrew means he or it will do. It shall cause to be. But if one wishes to say it shall be done, instead of ya'aseh, the word is pronounced ya'aseh. The difference in the vowels, but not in the consonants, makes all the difference. It is a world of difference. Even though the words are clearly related and quite close, yet the difference in the vowelization of and the pronunciation of the word changes it from active to passive and changes the entire meaning of the word. And this is true. This is a general rule of thumb in Hebrew. Now, back to the word yesh, or yes. The Hebrew word yesh, written with two letters, again consonants, the yod, the y sound, and the sh, the shin. These two letters produce the word when we add the vowel e under the yod, under the y consonant, produces the word yesh. But it needs to be stated that the second letter, the shin, the sh consonant, is also a s. How so? The Hebrew letter shin is also the Hebrew letter sin, and it depends simply where the dot is. If the dot, when the text is fully vocalized, if the dot appears on the right hand side on top of the letter, it is a shin, a sh sound. And if it is on the left side, it is a s, the very same letter. Again, this is a fact and indisputable reality of Hebrew. So the same word written and pronounced as yesh could also be, if we shift the dot to the left of that second letter, would be yes instead of yesh, and therefore it is exactly precisely the same word as the English word yes. And having realized this fact, the Hebrew word yesh immediately becomes a very convincing candidate for the etymology and the root of the word yes in English. If one asks what exactly is the meaning of the word yesh in Hebrew, the answer is simply that it is a general affirmation. It can either act and mean exactly what the word yes in English means, or it can mean that something exists, that something is therefore correct and true. There is another word in Hebrew for yes. The more common word in modern Hebrew for the word yes is ken. Ken comes from the word or the root of something being nachon, something being correct. That is to say, it stands firm and stable. It is true in that it is unchanging. And therefore that which is true, one can affirm by saying, ken, this is so. This is how it is. The same exact thing is true of the word yesh. In modern Hebrew today, a person might ask another member of the household, is there milk in the fridge? Yesh halav, is there milk? And the answer could be either ken, there is, yes, or it could be yesh, means the same thing. Yes, there is. There is in fact milk in the fridge. So the word yesh, a general affirmation in the Tanakh, in the Bible, and also in spoken Hebrew today, has the same meaning precisely as the English word yes. And thus, if we understand and internalize this information, we are no longer perplexed by the second consonant, the S, in the word yes, and its origin. And therefore this is one illuminating example of the primal Hebrew root being a source of words in other languages. The word source is another very good and I think convincing example of this same phenomenon. If we consult again the concise Oxford Dictionary, the word source is explained as follows: a spring, a fountainhead, or an origin or place or person from which thing comes, etc., etc. The etymology of the word source is given here in the concise Oxford Dictionary as Middle English, coming from originally the Old French, from the word sol or source, written here S-O-R-S. So literally you would pronounce that as written, you would pronounce that as source, or source, something like that. It is also written here alternately as S-O-U-R-S-E, which is, I suppose, in the medieval French, source. And these terms are said to be derived from the French verb sourdre, which means to rise, apparently from the Latin term or root word surgere, which is to rise or to raise. And from this we find, under the entry surge, this is the origin of the word surge, surgere in the Latin. And in this somewhat less well-known dictionary, the Universal Dictionary of the English Language, under the entry surge, we are told that the etymology of this word is from the Latin, as we said before, which is broken into two words: sur, which is above or up, and rigere, which is to guide or to direct. So to surge is to guide or to direct up. And this, of course, has to do with the motion of water, shall we say, surging up from a spring or a well or something of that nature. So, according to these dictionaries, the English word surge is to be traced back to the Latin word surgere, which is to rise, rise up, which itself is from the prefix sur, which is up, upward, and the rigere, which means to direct. And therefore, surgere is to direct something in an upward motion. And from this, it is claimed, we have the word source. Now, all of this could be understood and might be somewhat convincing. I would not myself describe it as very convincing or very obvious, this etymology, but it might be understood if we were referring to the source, the origin of a river, of a stream, a spring from which water flows or rises up. We could understand the word source in that sense. But the word source, we know, does not only refer to the rising up or the welling up, the swelling up of water. It also refers to simply the origin or the root of something. It therefore seems to me that a much more likely and authentic etymology for the word source is the Hebrew word shoresh. Shoresh, pronounced more correctly, shoresh, is of course written with the letter shin, both at the beginning and the end of the word. And the letter shin, as we have explained, is also the letter sin. The sh can also be read as a s, if the dot is simply shifted to the other side of the very same letter. And therefore the word shoresh can also be read as sores, and with slightly different vowels. Instead of sores, it could be simply source. You can literally write the word source, the English word, or the phonetic values of that word, source, in Hebrew, with the letter sin, which is the letter shin, and the letter waw, which indicates the, or without the letter waw, which indicates the vowel sound o, and the resh, which is the r, and again the shin or sin at the end of the word. The very same letters with a very small change in the vowels. And as we have explained, in Hebrew, the vowels are always interchangeable and fluid and elastic. That is the essence, and that is the basic format of the language, that it is written with consonantal signs, with letters which represent the consonantal sounds, whereas the vowels can be changed and are always able to change in order to indicate a different tense or passive as opposed to an active, etc. So you have the word, for example, ya'asa, which is he will do, or ya'asa, it will be done. The very same consonantal letters with very small change in the vowels. You can write the word shoresh, write it in one way with certain vowel sounds, and end up with the word shoresh. You can change those vowels very, very slightly, and the shin can be read as a sin. And instead of shoresh or shorsh, you could also read it, the same letters could be pronounced without the vowels indicating how you pronounce it. Those very same letters in Hebrew, instead of being shoresh, could be read as shorsh, and instead of shorsh, it can be source or source. And that is precisely the same word. And here we have a word which in Hebrew means root. The word shoresh means the root, such as a plant. The root, the origin of something, from which something springs, not limited to the sense of water rising up, or it doesn't have anything to do with an upward motion at all. It simply means the root or the origin, the source of something. And to round out this discussion, this shiur for today, in Parashat Bereshith, the first parasha, the first section of the book of Bereshith, Genesis, Perek Aleph Pasuk Teth, chapter 1, verse 9. Vayomer Elohim, God said, Yikhavu hamayim mitahat hashamayim el makom echad. May the waters gather together into one place, v'thero'eh hayabasha, and let the earth be seen, become visible. Vayhi chen, and so it was. Vayikra Elohim layabasha eres, and Hashem referred to the dry land as eres, ulemikwe hamayim qara yamim, and to the collection, the gathering together of the water, the seas, he referred to as yamim, seas, oceans. Vayar Elohim ki tov, and Hashem saw that it was good. The origin of the word mikwe, which in Hebrew, both in the Torah and in modern Hebrew, the word mikwe is a pool or a collection of water, a place where water has gathered together. The Shadal, Rabbi Shmuel David Lutzato, in his commentary, his Perush on the Torah, writes that the origin, the source, the shoresh, the exact same word we spoke of before. In Hebrew, this is, in linguistic terms, this refers to the root of a word. The shoresh of the word mikwe is kawa, kof, waw, hey. This word kawa, says Shadal, comes from the Hebrew word ko, pronounced in modern Hebrew as kav, but more correctly pronounced ko, which means a line or a flat surface. Now you all know that water and other liquids, when they are poured down into a lower geographical position, they form a pool, and the surface of that pool is straight. It is a straight line, as opposed to solids, which if they are thrown down a hill to the bottom of that hill, they will not form a flat, straight line. They will be jumbled and one on top of the other. It is the nature of water to form a straight line when at rest. Therefore, from the word ko, which means line or straight, we have the word mikwe, or the root of that word is kawa, which is to gather together, to form a pool which is also a straight line, which describes a straight, flat line. And in Hebrew, the word, therefore, for a collection, a pool of water, is a mikwe, a ritual bath in Hebrew, in halakha, in Jewish law, in the Torah, is referred to as a mikwe maim, a pool of water. And that is what is being referred to here in this pasuk, in this verse, that the waters were caused to gather together into form large collections of waters called seas and oceans, and the land masses rose up out of the water and became visible, and thus the landmass, the dry land, was separated from the water. This is described in this pasuk, in this verse in the Torah, and the seas are described as a mikwe maim, a collection of water. Rabbi David Shmuel Lutzato, the Shadal, explains in his Perush, in his commentary, that the word mikwe can be seen also in the Latin word for water, which is aqua. Aqua is exactly the same, almost exactly the same, as the word kau, which is a straight line in Hebrew, a flat straight line, and because that is the nature of water, to form that kind of physical shape and aspect, it is referred to as a mikwe, and in Latin he claims this is aqua, water. In related languages such as Spanish, agua. And he claims further that the word for straight in Latin, which is aikos, is also related to this very same root. These are just a few examples of the literally thousands, and I do not exaggerate, thousands of examples where Hebrew root words can be traced and found to be the source, the origin, and the root of many words in many languages. And therefore, the words of the Torah that the earth and people spoke, Safa Ehath, Udvarim Ahadim, spoke a language which was understood by all, which was then confused and confounded and transmuted in such a way that on the one hand it would be confusing and one would not understand the other. On the other hand, the confusion is not such that we cannot discover these connections. The truth of this is literally before us, before our eyes, and in our mouths, in the words that we speak.
Thank you, Rabbi Bar-Hayim. We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. We would also like to suggest the following opportunity to our viewers. If you identify with Rabbi Bar-Hayim's message and would like to sponsor or dedicate a video interview with the rabbi in honor or memory of a loved one, if you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.